Do you hide your true feelings to avoid upsetting someone? Do you shrink yourself to make others around you feel comfortable? A lot of us learn from a very early age that sometimes it's safer to be liked than to be ourselves fully. We learn to abandon ourselves just to belong. Welcome to the Journey Back Home podcast. I'm Isaac Qureshi. This is a space where we learn to reconnect with ourselves, unlearn who we were taught to be, and return to a life that feels like our own. Today, I would like to talk about self-abandonment, what it looks like, and how it starts, and how we slowly disconnect from ourselves just so we can be accepted, liked, or loved. Let's begin. If you say yes when you want to say no, if you apologize for taking up space, and if you soften your words to avoid conflict, chances are that you've learned that it's safer to be liked and to fit in than to be fully yourself. Most of the time, self-abandonment doesn't look dramatic. It sometimes starts in tiny moments. It looks like being the nice person, the easygoing one, the accommodating one, the one who everyone likes. And let's be honest, it does feel good because you feel wanted, accepted, needed. But the danger with self-abandonment is you become so focused on being liked that you stop asking yourself, what do I actually want? You start shaping yourself to meet others' comfort. You soften your words, you soften your truth. You say what they want to hear. You avoid conflict. And you start suppressing parts of yourself just so you can maintain that connection, that identity. And eventually you become disconnected from who you really are. It starts in tiny moments where you learn that honesty comes with the risk of rejection, that authenticity comes with the risk of disapproval, and that being yourself fully might cost you belonging and connection. I think a lot of my people pleasing started at a very young age. When I first came to Australia, I was around 5 years old. And a few years later, we went back to Pakistan. And I remember I really struggled fitting in, especially at school. My class fellows couldn't relate to me, and I couldn't relate to them. For them, I felt like an outsider. And I remember in particular, the lunch breaks were the hardest. I would often wait for everyone to leave, then to have my lunch in that empty classroom because I had no one to talk to or to play with. And when you're a child, experiences like these feel huge. And they somehow stay with you. Because at that time, all you want to do is belong. And I learned very quickly that in order to survive socially, I needed to become really accommodating, nice, and easygoing, even to those who bullied me. And looking back now, I can see how that was the beginning of my self-abandonment, of betraying parts of myself just so I can be accepted, just so I can belong. I learned that it was safer to be liked than to be fully myself. And I think a lot of us do that, not because we're being fake or manipulative, but because we've learned that being ourselves isn't always safe. So we adapt. We become agreeable, palatable, easy. And to be honest, it feels good because people also reward us for that. People call you nice, easygoing, selfless. But underneath all of that is years of exhaustion, resentment, and disconnection. Because constantly abandoning yourself slowly chips away at your sense of self, your self-worth. You stop asking, what do I want? and you start asking, what will make everyone else happy? From a young age, I could pick things up very quickly if something felt off. There's a memory from childhood that has stayed with me for years. When we were younger, my dad used to often travel overseas for work. And every time he would come back, he would bring some gifts or some token for all of us. But I remember this instance when dad went overseas once and he didn't get a chance to do any shopping. So he asked mum to buy some gifts for us and he'll say that he got them for us. That was the plan. And so when he came back, we were all eagerly sitting, me and my siblings were eagerly sitting around the suitcase. And as he opened the bag and handed out gifts to each one of us, I loved them. But there was something inside of me that knew he didn't buy them overseas. And so I told him, I said, I love it, but I know that mum bought it. And I remember everyone's reaction. The embarrassment on my dad's face. How my mum tried to correct me and say, no, he brought them. And my brothers shushing me, that what are you saying? That's so rude. I had completely ruined the atmosphere and I felt terrible. Kids are terrible with understanding subtext, I think. My dad doing that was his act of love because he didn't want to disappoint us that he didn't get anything. And that was such a thoughtful and loving thing. And even though in that moment, I just said what felt true to me, I learned something important. That truth has consequences. That sometimes honesty comes at the cost of hurting someone you love. It's moments like these that stay with you. It's not because they're traumatic, but it's because something you said or did disappointed or upset someone you love. And they slowly teach you to become a lot more conscious of what you say and how you behave. So you learn to pretend. You learn to soften things. You say, oh my God, I love it, even when you don't. You learn that it's safer to protect others' feelings than to risk disappointing them. And I think a lot of us carry those patterns into adulthood. We stay quiet to keep the peace. We hide parts of ourselves. And we perform versions of ourselves that are more acceptable, more palatable. We feel like it's our responsibility to protect someone else's feelings. Every time we hold back our truth, every time we soften our words, we do not give honest feedback to our friends or family members or colleagues or people who need it, we are indirectly saying that we don't trust that you can handle the truth. We don't trust that you can manage your emotions or handle the disappointment, the disapproval, the rejection. And so we rob them of the truth. Over time, those tiny betrayals build up. We end up staying way too long in relationships that drain us, in jobs that exhaust us, and in conversations that feel dishonest and not aligned with ourselves. And you keep saying yes when your body's begging you for a no. And eventually, you become disconnected from yourself. And I think that's why so many of us feel lost. Not because we don't know who we are deep down, but because we've spent years ignoring ourselves. And now we even don't recognize who we are. Years of choosing approval over authenticity, comfort over truth, and belonging over honesty. For me, I think my burnout and quarter-life crisis was part of that wake-up call. When I finally slowed down, I realized how much of my life had been shaped around approval, around being accepted. And I had this uncomfortable thought, do people even know who I am outside of who I've become for other people? And I also realized that there's a difference between being liked and being truly known. Because if people only like the version of you that performs for acceptance, do people even know you? I think a lot of people think that they lack self-confidence, whereas I think that it's their nervous system. Their nervous system has learned that visibility and self-expression isn't safe. So they hide and shrink themselves. And I think healing is in many ways grieving the parts of ourselves we suppressed, grieving how long we've been disconnected from ourselves. All the years of suppressing, pretending, hiding, shrinking, and trying to earn belonging. Healing isn't becoming someone new. Maybe it's becoming who we were before we learned that being ourselves wasn't safe. It's returning to yourself, that part of yourself that is beneath all that noise, the masks, the conditioning, the fears, the pretense. It's returning to that self before it was abandoned. And here's the hard truth no one talks about: the cost of living authentically. When you start speaking your truth, when you start living in alignment with who you are, when you start showing up truthfully and stop abandoning yourself for approval, not everyone will understand you. Your relationships will change. And some people will be uncomfortable when you stop performing the version of yourself they've been used to. You may disappoint some, and you may be misunderstood by others. But abandoning yourself also comes at a cost, which I believe is a far greater cost. Because abandoning yourself and living a version of you that's not aligned with who you truly are is exhausting. And if you lose people along the way as you find your truth, then they were never your people to begin with. And once you become aligned with who you truly are, the right people, the right opportunities will come your way. So I want to leave you with a few questions. Where in your life are you abandoning yourself right now? What parts of yourself have you suppressed just to feel accepted? And who would you be if you no longer needed permission to be fully yourself? And maybe that's where the journey back home begins, with awareness, with honesty, and with choosing yourself in everyday moments, over and over again. Thank you for being here. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll speak with you in the next episode.